Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Tech Talk, the podcast exclusively for Innserve colleagues. I'm Grace, your host, and in this episode we're revisiting FLS, our new planning tool. We'll be addressing the challenges we've encountered since its launch and highlighting the work our dedicated teams are doing to ensure its success, whilst also answering some key questions from our technicians. Plus, we'll be speaking with members of our newly formed colleague committee to learn how they are championing your voices and ensuring everyone at Innserve feels heard. So, wherever you're listening, settle in and enjoy this episode of Tech Talk. Let's get started. Today, we're joined by returning guest Kate Bradley, our Regional Operations Manager, and joining her is Alan Gormley, Director of Transformation. We're going to be talking about FLS, our new planning tool, and addressing some of the challenges we've faced since its launch in February. Alan, let's start with the big picture. Can you please explain why Innserve felt the need to change our resource deployment process and why we chose FLS in the first place?
Yeah, of course. Great place to start. So when we looked at our resource deployment process, it was clear that things just weren't working as efficiently as they could. We have a really dedicated field and planning team, but the way we were planning and allocating work wasn't making the best use of our time or skills. We were relying on manual processes, static schedules, and frankly, a lot of juggling just to keep things ticking over. It wasn't scalable, and it definitely wasn't sustainable. So we took a step back and asked ourselves, how do we build something smarter? How do we make life easier for our planners, our technicians, and ultimately our customers? And that's what led us to FLS. We wanted a system that could dynamically allocate work in real time, that could respond to changes on the ground, and that could help us get the right person to the right job at the right time with minimal waste. And FLS stood out because it wasn't just another scheduling tool, it's a proper optimization engine, and it takes into account travel times, skill sets, SLAs, and even local knowledge to generate plans that actually work in the real world. So, yeah, in short, we knew we needed to change because our old way of working was holding us back. And we chose FLS because it helps us to deploy our people in the most flexible and efficient way possible.
That makes total sense. And Kate, following the launch, we encountered some significant challenges. Can you be as transparent as possible with the person listening to help them understand what went wrong and why we moved back to manual planning?
Yeah, I think first off, it is worth saying that initially the launch went well. For the biggest system change in 10 years, nothing catastrophic happened and we haven't needed to back out. So whilst we are facing some challenges, I think it's important that we do recognise that as well. So what did go wrong and why we moved to manual planning, there wasn't anything major. There was just sort of like lots of little things. So we saw a slow decline in SLA performance nationally, especially for our calls. We felt that there was too much movement of the calls between technicians, and if we couple that with the sync issues that we've seen, when we talk about sync issues, it's important that people understand the data moves in two directions, so from the app to FLS and then from FLS to the app. So sync issues in both of those directions. We did have technicians travelling to calls out of order. This caused a rejection of data from FLS, and that then kind of like just freezes their day, for want of a better phrase. We did have an issue with calls not being processed in real time. Another significant problem we saw was the tech temp absence button that the technicians use. That was just clearing all of their calls from their day. And I think as well, trying to change too much all at once. It was a big culture change for both the planners and the technicians. And so I think it was just a little bit of a step too far. I'd also like to be really quite clear about what manual planning is. So FLS hasn't been switched off. FLS is still being used as a tool of getting calls from the planner to the technician.
I didn't know that. That's really helpful, thank you. And are there any particular regions where we've found that FLS does need more manual intervention or adjustments? And if so, what are the unique challenges in those areas?
So I wouldn't say particular regions or locations, apart from maybe the obvious, so such as Scotland and having to take into account Scottish Islands and sort of on the south coast places like the Isle of Wight. So with that, we've kind of not done anything significant associated with geography. What we're finding the biggest manual intervention currently is associated with outlets and their access times. So we're having calls logged as access 9 o'clock till 9 o'clock, and FLS is then planning it for a tech to attend at 10 o'clock in the day. The tech is doing the right thing, ringing the customer with a courtesy call. Customer is then saying, "Oh, I'm not going to be there till 4 o'clock." So then the planner is having to unallocate that call and reallocate it for later on in the day. That seems to be where our biggest sort of intervention is, and also trying to find calls that the technicians can access first thing in the morning. So that's somewhere that we're focusing our attentions on right now.
And what can we do to improve those access times?
So at the moment, we're testing something that the diagnostics team have. So previously their access times were really quite limited that they could choose from. We've now actually replicated something that we've taken out of FLS, whereby they can specify much more specific access times. I'm also working very closely with Willie McGivern to try and see, can we do things differently at the beginning of the day? So rather than having technicians blocked off all day for maintenance, if access times first thing in the morning is such an issue, can we do more pre-planned work at that moment in time? Things like brand switches, maybe cop calls, something where we've actually physically organised access. So then when maintenance calls start to come in later on in the day, we've actually got better opportunity of being able to go to them.
That's brilliant. Thank you for the transparency on that. And some feedback we've had from technicians in the past has been, say, for example, they call a customer in the morning and the customer lets them know that they're not going to be on site until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The technician had the option to sort of keep that in their back pocket and attend at a better time for the customer. But with FLS, I understand that's not the case. What are we doing about that?
So we're helping to drive the diagnostics team have better conversations at the point of call logging. We're giving them a better opportunity to be able to log more descriptive access times. And so we want to start having the conversations with the customer associated with, these are the access times that you're giving us. So they're the times the technician will be arriving. Does that work for you? To try and have those conversations up front with the customer so that the technicians can then be confident that when the call is planned, it is planned for a time that has already been pre-agreed with the customer.
Absolutely. And we're not the only business that is looking to do that. That's kind of standard practice with a lot of businesses, British Gas, Sky, all of those other businesses give you a time slot. And if you're not in, then that appointment is missed. So, Kate and Alan, it sounds like the initial launch had some teething issues. However, you have been working on solutions, which we've discussed, and I understand we've had a successful trial in a specific area. To get us started on the positive steps being taken, can you talk to me about that trial area, what key changes were made, and what have been the results so far?
You're right, it hasn't all been plain sailing. I think when we first launched FLS, one of the biggest challenges we hit was around configuration. On paper, the system makes incredibly smart decisions, but in the real world, those decisions rely on a lot of detailed rules being just right. We already knew that to get the best out of FLS, we needed to fine-tune those configurations in real time. It isn't a set it and forget it kind of thing. It needs continuous adjustment. But the more critical issue is with the syncing between our internal systems and FLS. And there are moments where the two just aren't talking to each other in the way they need to. And it's created some real disruption for our planners and technicians. So we made the call to temporarily move back to manual planning in certain areas, and Kate's already touched on that. And it's given us the breathing space we need to properly investigate the sync issues and to run some controlled trials to improve how FLS makes decisions in specific cells. And actually, that brings us onto one of the real positives, the trials that Kate's about to talk through. It's been a key step in building confidence back in the system and proving what FLS can do when the conditions are right.
Yeah, so the trial that we used, just a big thank you first for the technicians that were our guinea pigs. That's the A17 team. The settings changes that we put in place. So we organised a general route for the Isle of Wight, so the calls weren't automatically allocated to technicians when there's ferry bookings that needed to be taken into account. We organised start postcodes for technicians, where if they generally tend to work in an area that's a little bit further away from their start postcode. The biggest change that I think had the most impact was we used a setting called as soon as possible for our 4-hour calls. And what that does is it makes that call the next priority for the technician. So it will always push a call out to be able to achieve that 4-hour call. We've also been working with an even workload function. So some technicians will have, in the early days of FLS, noticed that a technician is fully booked with work, whereas another technician didn't have any calls planned on them. So we've been working with a setting with even workload to try and iron that out a little bit. And we also asked the area managers to review the data in terms of the drive times that they'd allocated against technicians and just change those slightly. The result that we had over 2 weeks now, the SLA performance has been maintained. Every day we saw less carryover of calls. It has been a positive experience. I can't say thank you to the technicians enough.
Sounds like there's been some really big positive steps in the trial. We've received some questions from the technicians who are part of that trial. And the first big question is, why does FLS assign jobs to you after your shift is finished? For example, today I finished at 4, but at 20 past 4, I got a 4-hour SLA call assigned to me. Can you explain why that happens?
Yeah, so there's a few potential reasons. Your shift pattern might not be up to date in FLS. So if a technician has started work early, don't know, maybe on an install or had a particularly high level of driving that they needed to get to a timed visit, if that shift hasn't been updated and if your shift still stays open, FLS would see you as being available to take those calls. Potentially, it could also be that it was assigned to you earlier, but due to a sync issue, didn't land on your device until after you've finished. It could have been fixed by the planner when it was allocated. So if it's fixed, it won't get removed unless somebody manually intervenes. And also the planners do still have the ability to override any warnings associated with planning out a shift time. So there's a number of things that could have potentially happened, but hopefully that gives some explanation as to why that might have been the case.
That's great. Thank you so much. Another technician asked, why does FLS still not assign jobs first when it says they need to be the first call?
Depends on where it's saying that it needs to be first call. So if that's just typed into the notes, FLS doesn't read notes. So in that instance, we're then relying on a person reading them. Given the level of maintenance calls that are logged every day, the planners can't read notes on every single call. So if it's in the notes field, that might be where it's getting missed. I'm really hopeful that with the adjustments that we're making to how access times can be logged by the diagnostics team, that this will have an impact on that as well.
Brilliant. We also had a question around, why does FLS ignore jobs when they are out of charter in red, putting other jobs in front of them?
So we've told FLS it cannot plan a call outside of its time window. So it will just ignore them, and somebody has to manually intervene. It's better if we plan everything that we possibly can within SLA and then look for planner intervention for something being planned outside of SLA. We always knew that the system wouldn't be fully automatic. We always said that for FLS to be as successful as possible, it would be a combination between FLS working automatically and a planner intervening where needed. And out of date calls is this intervention. That's where we need the planners to be looking, because each time they are going to have to make a decision how best to achieve that call and what impact that might have on other calls that are coming in.
Okay. And finally, a technician reported, we are phoning customers ahead of arriving to a job to ensure access, but then the job's taken off us and it makes us look silly. So what is happening there and how will that be addressed?
Yeah, I understand that. Worth explaining, I think, how it is designed to work. So the settings we have right now is that a technician's next call is fixed when they travel on their first call. As an example, if a technician has got 3 calls on their screen, when they travel to the first call, call number 2 would get fixed. Call number 3 is still free to move around. And so it's okay to make contact to the outlets that's second on your list. And I would fully recommend that we try and do so. It is fixed to you. So unless somebody manually intervenes, that call shouldn't move. We do have an agreement with the diagnostics team that anything that needs more than 40 minutes notice to for a technician arrival will be marked as planner attention. So again, this is another way a planner needs to get involved, agree the access time with the customer, and then allocate accordingly. We can fix calls and also confirm them with a time window in FLS. And what that means is that job will only ever sort of shift 20 minutes in either direction. So if we said to a customer, somebody will be there at 2 o'clock, then there's the opportunity for it to shift 20 minutes before 2 or to 20 past 2, but it shouldn't shift outside of that time window. There is obviously the same sort of delays that we had before FLS. So if a technician does get stuck on a job, or if a technician does get stuck in traffic, then clearly you're going to be delayed. It's worth saying as well that 4-hour calls could be put between the current call and the next call due to the emergency nature. However, that would be dependent on whereabouts in the work plan and the drive time between that call and the next call. And obviously planners can still remove calls as well. So just because a call has been taken off you doesn't mean that it's FLS that's done that. There is also humans still working on, still looking at the system, and they can also make changes as well. But I would like to think if that was to happen, they'd get in contact with you and let you know that they've taken the job off you.
Okay, thank you very much for answering those questions, Kate. It's clear that there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to improve the FLS system. How can technicians stay informed about the progress, and what are the next steps in the rollout?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Look, if I'm honest, we probably haven't been as good as we should have been about keeping everyone in the loop, especially when it comes to the specific challenges we've been working through and the progress we've been making behind the scenes. So I'll absolutely hold my hands up on that, and I'll commit to doing better on that over the next few weeks. I think in terms of what's next, our main focus right now is fixing the syncing issues and making sure the integration between FLS and our internal systems is stable. At the same time, we're continuing with the configuration trials to fine-tune how the system makes decisions in different areas. And once we're confident everything's working as it should, we'll look to gradually roll out the optimization and automation side of FLS again, but in a more controlled, phased way that gives us time to test and respond as we go. And look, if anyone out there has any specific questions or just wants to understand a bit more about what's happening, then you're more than welcome to message me directly, in between myself and the project team will get back to you. So yeah, lots going on, and I massively appreciate everyone's patience and support as we work through it.
Thanks, Alan. So, Alan, we always ask our guests on the podcast some quick-fire questions so the listener can get to know you a little bit better. As it's your first time on the podcast and Kate has already answered these questions, it's your turn. So, what is the best pint you've ever had, and where did you have it? Paint us a picture.
I don't know what it was called, but it was in Prague. I don't know what the beer was called, but it was in Prague. That was the best beer I've ever had. It was in a bar next to the hotel, and the guy was exceptionally drunk, and we sat there drinking beer at about 11 o'clock at night. And when we got the bill at the end of it, he only charged us about €4, so it was a win-win all round.
Sounds great. And we all have our go-to snacks when we're enjoying a drink. What's your favourite? Do you have any recommendations for the listener?
Bacon frazzles. If I'm being more civilised, cashew nuts. Stick with the bacon frazzles. Cashew nuts will just get laughed at.
That was the normal answer and the posh answer. Thank you, Kate and Alan, for your transparency and detailed explanations today. I appreciate you sharing your insights and addressing the technicians' questions as well. I understand this is a complex project. However, I hope you've given the listener some confidence that FLS will be a success in the near future. And thank you for joining me today. Let's dive into an exciting new initiative that's all about giving our colleagues a stronger voice. I'm talking about the newly formed Colleague Committee. And to tell us all about it, we've got two very special guests with us today. First up, we've got Mark Freeman, our Smart Dispense Customer Service Manager. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Grace.
And joining Mark is Scott Bowlby, our IT support manager. Scott, great to have you here.
Hi, Grace. Pleased to be here.
So to kick things off, please explain to the listener of the podcast, what is the Innserve Colleague Committee?
We just want to be the voice of our colleagues across the business, both Sunderland, Tadcaster, in the field, Follingsby. We want to gather your feedback and get our voice heard to the exec, because feedback that we have had previously is that people don't necessarily always feel heard. We want to become that medium to do that for you on your behalf.
There's a lot of, in the field, there's a lot of unhappiness. And they feel as if they're not being heard. And so if we can change that through listening to our colleagues and putting their gripes, their issues towards the exec, and if we can get anything changed, then hopefully it'll be a great place to work.
And Scott, with Mark saying that there's some sort of feelings of not feeling heard in the field, is that something you find is echoed in the office?
Yeah, I don't think it's as amplified as in the field. I think just naturally our colleagues in the field do feel less heard. We obviously have a higher presence of exec and SLT members in Tadcaster and Sunderland. But yeah, actively just want to listen to our colleagues, identify improvements and collaborate together to make a better working environment for everybody.
Totally. And I guess our colleagues on the front line have the key to unlock some of those issues that we're facing in the business at the moment.
Yes, a lot of them keep it to themselves, speak to their colleagues, which are technicians, don't feel as if they can talk to certain management, but at least now with the colleague committee, they can drop an email, they can pick the phone up to any of the colleague committee members, and we can look at it behind the scenes and then take it to the people that need to be aware and the exec team.
Absolutely. So how often does the committee meet, and what might a typical meeting look like?
So we meet once a week on Teams, which is normally about an hour and a half, and then we have a face-to-face either in Tadcaster or Sunderland, alternate months. So face-to-face once every month.
How does the committee gather feedback from colleagues? Obviously, if you bring in various issues from different parts of the business, how do colleagues send in that feedback? How do you receive ideas and issues from our colleagues?
So at the minute, a large proportion of what we're discussing are topics that have been handed over to us from our existing exec and SLT, namely the quarterly incentive plan. So that has taken up a large proportion of what we have been talking about. Going forward, the committee is going to be split and covering various areas of the country geographically. So certain people are going to be covering certain cells and different areas of the business. So there will be a sort of nominated member of the committee that covers a certain part or area, and that will be the go-to person for our colleagues to contact and then feedback to the committee. And hopefully by the time this podcast goes out, that information will be out there. But yeah, it is something we're working on at the minute.
The question on everyone's lips at the moment is the quarterly incentive plan. What's happening? What are we going to see coming out of the colleague committee? Can you give us any insight or update on that at the moment?
Yeah, so we have been working hard looking into what's going to suit both our colleagues and the business, because ultimately it's got to be fair for our colleagues and the business. We've had several different ideas, so we are making progress with that. We will get some communication out as soon as we can, because what we don't want to do is get communication out and it be wrong. We need to make sure that we're on the same page as what the exec are. So as soon as we've got some more details, we will get it out to everybody.
Just want to reinforce that when we spent time looking into this area, this quarterly incentive plan, we really want to make it simple. One of the real big negatives from previous plans is from our colleagues, and the feedback that we've had is that they're overcomplicated, they're difficult to understand, and they don't know where they sit, and they don't know how far are they off hitting the quarterly incentive. So we just really want to ensure that we do implement a plan that suits our colleagues.
That's great. And can you walk me through any examples of feedback that you might have had so far that has been turned into action?
So we've had a couple of things passed over to us. So one of them for the office, there's a shortage of chairs. We've spoke to the people that we need to. We have got chairs coming in. There is some in Tadcaster at the moment, but there's not quite enough. So once they're allocated out, we will be getting some more. We are currently looking at a couple of other things. So we're looking at the smart dispense workwear, because the smart dispense technicians aren't able to get exactly the same workwear as what maintenance or installs are. Some people would think it's minor, but they should be able to get the same as what's out there for everybody else.
Everybody deserves to feel comfortable at work, and funny that you mentioned the chairs, because I came into the office the other day and my chair mysteriously disappeared and I had to steal someone else's chair. So I can completely relate. That's great to hear. So we have got a few examples already of feedback that's come in via colleagues and action that's been taken off the back of that. So hopefully that trust in the organisation will grow and more people will start to send through ideas and any gripes that they've got. Is that the goal?
Yeah, I think it'll be a natural occurrence. I think once our colleagues start to see action points that have been raised and fixes put in place by the committee, things will naturally start to crop up further. Our colleagues will feel more confident in raising issues around. And just to add to Mark's point, we've also looked into the Coastliner initiative for our Tadcaster employees. So that basically provides a discount for our employees at Tadcaster for a Coastliner ticket.
So we've talked about field, we've talked about office, we're looking at the chairs, we're looking at the smart dispense uniforms. What about the warehouses? Have we had any feedback from those guys so far?
Yes, we have, and quite surprising for me, and I think it was for the other committee members, that Follingsby, the team's not even got a coffee machine. So we've got them in Sunderland and Tadcaster. So at the moment, that is one of the things that we're trying to sort for them.
That's fabulous. And I can imagine that a good cup of coffee would help on those cold winter mornings when they're sorting through pallets.
They would need a coffee, to be fair, Grace. They've not even got heating up there.
Really?
It is very chilly. I have also seen Vicky Biggs, our health and safety manager, rumbling through some pallets herself, so I'm sure she'd also appreciate that. So as I understand it, Rachel Braddock, our Chief People Officer, is the exec sponsor of the committee. Can you talk to me a little bit about how the exec work with the committee and Rachel's role when she's with you guys?
So Rachel is there to guide us, help us, guide us. If it's something that we can't get involved in as a committee, for instance, that might be something to do with the union. We can't get involved with that. She'll even advise us on, this is the person you need to speak to, something as simple as that, or don't go there, don't touch that, we can't get involved.
So to be clear, Rachel's not there to be the final say or give a decision. She's there to guide and offer support.
Exactly.
In Rachel's own words, she describes herself as an enabler. She gives us access to areas and people and conversations that we wouldn't normally have access to.
And what are the limitations of the colleague committee? Are there any areas of the business that you simply can't or won't address?
Pay. We can't address pay. We can't touch salaries.
That makes sense. And we should leave that to the professionals, right?
Yep.
And finally, how are you guys planning on keeping colleagues informed about the work that the committee is doing and any progress that you're making along the way?
So we're planning on using various communication streams, one being email, two being people first. We've created a colleague committee community in which we're going to be regularly posting to. We're also going to be utilising the weekly briefings that every colleague should have every week with their manager. We're also planning in the future in holding colleague committee drop-in sessions. So these will be across both sites and also in the field for our colleagues to come along, join, come up with ideas and just collaborate and engage.
I would love to have you guys back in a couple of months to talk about any progress, any projects that are ongoing, so the listeners can be aware of any changes coming their way. If the person listening today could only take away one key message about the colleague committee, what would that message be?
It doesn't matter where you are within the business, whether you're in Sunderland, Follingsby, out in the field. I will get your voice heard within the committee and with the exec.
We're here for you. We're here to listen to you, and we're here to become a voice to speak directly to the people that make the decisions and can make change and make positive change.
What would you say to people who perhaps are untrusting of the committee or the business, who might think that this is just one more thing that they might never hear about again?
I don't think it's going anywhere. I think the exec team and James have made a decision, and I think they're saying we need to hear what all of our colleagues have got struggles with. The only thing I will say is with this, there is a few people that are saying that it's not going to change. Let's see. Give us the chance to make a change.
I agree, and I wish you all the luck in the world. I am excited to see what you guys can achieve this year, and I'll be sending my feedback through shortly. Okay, so hard questions out of the way. We ask all of our podcast guests some quick fire questions so the listener can get to know you a little bit better. So Mark, we'll start with you. What is the best pint you've ever had and where did you have it? Paint us a picture.
So the best pint was at the Gooman Tower at London Bridge. And the only reason it was the best pint I've had because it cost £9.50, so I savoured every drop of it.
You had to make it last.
Yes.
And why were you there? Was it a special occasion?
Just for work. Was in London seeing some SD techs out doing some audits, and I was just in the Tower Bridge area staying in London for a couple of nights.
Scott, on to you. We all have our go-to snacks when we enjoy a drink. What is your favourite go-to snack? Any hidden gems? Give us some recommendations.
Probably a bit controversial, but absolute go-to snack would be pork scratchings.
It's a good
The
shout.
fattier, the better. Not too hairy though.
Oh no.
Can I say that? No.
Well, thank you both, Mark and Scott, for such an insightful look into the colleague committee. It's clear how passionate you are about making Innserve a fantastic place to work and how dedicated you are to ensuring every colleague's voice is heard. For the listener, remember, this is your committee and your input is invaluable. Don't hesitate to reach out to Mark, Scott, or any member of the committee with your ideas and feedback. Change will only happen if we work together as one big team. I'm really excited to see what the committee can achieve in 2025. Thanks again, Mark and Scott, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you, Grace.
Thank you.
And that wraps up episode 2 of Tech Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in and taking the time to learn more about how we're all working together to keep Britain pouring. A huge thank you to Kate, Alan, Mark and Scott for sharing their valuable insights today. It was fantastic having you on the show. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. Please share your feedback with me or our producer, Hal Rhodes. We're always looking for ways to improve Tech Talk and make it even better. Thank you again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.